Based on your request, I'll create a realistic story titled Innocent or Guilty: The Controversial Trial That Divided Opinions, set in the United States. I notice your synopsis mentions Victorian London, but since you specified the United States as the setting, I'll adapt the story to an American context while maintaining the core elements of your synopsis. Here's the complete story in 4 chapters of approximately 1,100 words each, in English. You choose Innocent or Guilty: The Controversial Trial That Divided Opinions. Chapter 1. The harsh December wind swept through the streets of Boston, a city where old money and new ambitions collided beneath the weight of tradition. Julian Croft stood at his office window, watching snowflakes dance against the twilight sky. At 42, he had become one of America's most celebrated authors, his novels dissecting the human condition with such precision that readers often felt uncomfortably exposed. His latest book sat prominently displayed in every bookstore window across the nation, its controversial themes sparking debates in literary circles and living rooms alike. The phone on his desk rang, piercing the silence of his thoughts. Julian answered with the practiced calm that had become his public persona. "Mr. Croft?" Detective Michael Abernathy's voice was flat, professional. "I need you to come down to the station. There's been an incident at your home." Julian's hand tightened around the receiver. "What kind of incident?" The pause that followed lasted too long. "It's about your wife, sir. Ilara is dead." The world tilted beneath Julian's feet, his vision narrowing to a pinpoint. He managed to ask, "How?" though he already sensed the answer would shatter whatever remained of his carefully constructed life. "That's what we need to discuss. A car will be there in 10 minutes. 3 hours later, Julian sat in an interrogation room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his face. His hands, the same hands that had crafted worlds and characters beloved by millions, were now photographed for traces of evidence. His clothes had been taken, replaced with a standard-issue grey sweatsuit. The detective's questions circled like vultures. "Where were you between 2 and 4 p.m. today, Mr. Croft?" "At my office, working. I told you this already. Can anyone verify that?" "My assistant left at noon. I instructed her not to disturb me." Detective Abernathy nodded, making a note. "Convenient." He placed photographs on the table between them, sliding them toward Julian with deliberate slowness. "Your wife's body was found in your home study. Multiple stab wounds. The knife, one from your kitchen set, was recovered nearby." Julian's eyes fixed on the images before him, unable to reconcile the broken form with the vibrant woman he had kissed goodbye that morning. Ilara, with her filmmaker's eye and relentless ambition, had been his equal in every way, his muse, his critic, his greatest challenge. "I didn't do this," Julian whispered, his voice catching. "I loved her." "Past tense already," Abernathy noted. "Interesting choice of words." By morning, Julian Croft's arrest dominated every news channel in America. The headline, "Best-selling author charged in wife's murder," flashed across screens nationwide. What followed was an unprecedented media frenzy. Julian's books were pulled from shelves by some retailers while selling out completely at others. His previous interviews were dissected for hints of violence or instability. Online forums debated his guilt or innocence with religious fervor. District Attorney Caroline Winters stood before cameras on the courthouse steps, her red blazer a splash of color against the gray December sky. "The state will pursue justice for Ilara Croft, whose promising life was cut short in an act of domestic violence. No amount of literary acclaim can shield a murderer from the consequences of his actions." Indeed, in his cell, Julian received a visitor, Sophia Mendez, a defense attorney known for taking on impossible cases. Her reputation was built on meticulous preparation and an almost supernatural ability to read juries. "They're building a circumstantial case," she told him, her dark eyes assessing. "No alibi, your fingerprints on the murder weapon, expected since it came from your kitchen. Neighbors reported hearing arguments between you and Ilara over the past few months." "Every marriage has arguments," Julian said, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Ilara was passionate. We both were. That doesn't mean I killed her. Tell me about your marriage, Sophia demanded. Everything, including what you'd prefer to hide. Julian's gaze met hers. Ilara was working on a documentary about the hidden lives of celebrated authors. She had interviews with people from my past, people I haven't spoken to in years. She said it would be her masterpiece. And you were okay with that? Julian's laugh was hollow. Would it matter if I wasn't? Ilara did what Ilara wanted. Always. As snow continued to fall outside, Julian began the painful process of unraveling his life for this stranger who now held his fate in her hands. The trial was set to begin in 8 weeks, remarkably fast for a case of this profile, but the prosecution claimed to have overwhelming evidence. What Julian didn't know was that Detective Abernathy had already found Ilara's external hard drive containing footage for her documentary. Footage that would expose secrets Julian had spent a lifetime burying. Across town, in a modestly furnished apartment, journalist Rebecca Chen stared at her laptop screen, reading everything she could find about Julian Croft. As an investigative reporter for the Boston Chronicle, she had covered countless trials, but something about this case nagged at her professional instincts. The narrative being constructed in the media felt too neat, too convenient. Rebecca had built her career on questioning convenient narratives. She opened a new document and began typing, "Innocent or guilty, the Julian Croft case." Below it, she wrote a single question. What was Ilara Croft about to reveal? The snow fell harder outside her window, blanketing the city in a deceptive purity that hid the complexities beneath. Rebecca didn't know it yet, but her investigation would soon intertwine with Julian's fate in ways neither could anticipate, drawing her into a dangerous search for truth in a case where everyone, including Julian himself, seemed to be hiding something. Chapter 2. The courtroom hummed with anticipation on the trial's opening day. Outside, protesters gathered with competing signs, some demanding justice for Ilara, others proclaiming Julian's innocence. Media trucks lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like modern totems. Inside, Julian sat beside Sophia, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the prison garb he'd worn for the past 2 months. He had lost weight, his once handsome face now gaunt, eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. District Attorney Carolyn Winters approached the jury with measured steps, her voice clear and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a man who built worlds with words while destroying the very real world he shared with his wife. The evidence will show that Julian Croft, faced with the prospect of having his carefully constructed public image dismantled by his wife's documentary work, chose to silence her permanently. She projected images onto the courtroom screen. The crime scene, the bloody knife, Ilara's final moments captured in clinical police photographs. Several jurors flinched. Julian closed his eyes. The prosecution will demonstrate that Mr. Croft had both motive and opportunity. Blood evidence places him at the scene. The murder weapon bears his fingerprints, and most tellingly, computer records show that immediately after the estimated time of death, someone used Mr. Croft's laptop to search, "How thoroughly do police check alibis?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Julian leaned toward Sophia, whispering urgently, "I never searched that. Someone is setting me up." When Sophia's turn came, she addressed the jury with quiet confidence. "The prosecution has presented a story, and Mr. Croft is indeed familiar with the power of stories. But this trial isn't about crafting the most compelling narrative. It's about facts. And the facts will show that the evidence against Julian Croft is entirely circumstantial, manipulated to fit a predetermined conclusion by investigators who stopped looking for the truth the moment they decided my client was guilty." From the press gallery, Rebecca Chen watched the proceedings with keen interest, her notebook filling with observations. During a recess, she approached Detective Abernathy in the hallway. "Detective Rebecca Chen, Boston Chronicle. I've been researching Ilara Croft's documentary work. Sources tell me she was interviewing someone from Julian's past, someone connected to an incident from his college days. Care to comment? Abernathy's expression hardened. No comment on ongoing investigations. But I'll tell you this. We're following every lead, including what was on Mrs. Croft's hard drives. Drives? Plural? Rebecca caught the slip immediately. The detective turned away without responding, but Rebecca had what she needed, confirmation that there was more than one storage device. The police had only publicly mentioned recovering a single external drive. As the trial progressed, the prosecution built their case methodically. Julian's lack of alibi. The forensic evidence placing him at the scene, expected, given that it was his home, but damning in context. The testimony of neighbors who had heard arguments between the couple, including one particularly heated exchange the week before Ilara's death. She was shouting, "You can't stop me from telling the truth," testified Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, who lived next door. Mr. Croft replied something like, "Some truths are better left buried." It was unsettling enough that I almost called someone, but she trailed off, looking regretful. Through it all, Julian maintained his composure, though Rebecca noticed how his hands occasionally trembled when certain evidence was presented. During the second week of the trial, the prosecution called Dr. Lawrence Morgan, a psychiatrist who had analyzed Julian's novels. Mr. Croft's work reveals a preoccupation with duality, characters who present one face to the world while harboring darker impulses, Dr. Morgan testified. His third novel, The Vanishing Point, features a protagonist who murders his partner to prevent the revelation of a damaging secret. The method described bears striking similarities to Mrs. Croft's murder. Sophia objected immediately. "Your Honor, the prosecution is attempting to use my client's fiction as evidence of criminal intent. This is not only prejudicial, but fundamentally misunderstands the nature of creative writing." "Sustained," ruled Judge Harrison. "The jury will disregard the witness's last statement." But Rebecca, watching the jurors' faces, knew the damage was done. Some things once heard couldn't be unheard. That evening, while reviewing her notes in her apartment, Rebecca received an anonymous email containing a video file. The sender's address was a random string of characters. The message read simply, "What Ilara found. Be careful who sees this." With trepidation, Rebecca clicked play. The video showed Ilara Croft interviewing an elderly man identified only as Professor E. He spoke haltingly about an incident at Dartmouth in 2003 involving Julian and another student named Thomas Blackwood. "The university covered it up," the professor said. "Blackwood was found dead, supposedly suicide. But I saw Julian leaving his room that night, looking disturbed. When I asked him about it later, he said sometimes people had to be stopped before they could destroy others. I reported it, but nothing came of it. Croft's family had too much influence." The video ended abruptly. Rebecca sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. If authentic, this could suggest a pattern, Julian silencing those who threatened to expose him. But it could also be a sophisticated fake, designed to further incriminate him. She needed to verify the professor's identity and the incident at Dartmouth before proceeding. Unbeknownst to Rebecca, she wasn't the only one who had received the video. In his office, Detective Abernathy watched the same footage, a grim satisfaction settling over his features. "Got you," he murmured to the image of Julian frozen on his screen. Chapter 3. The defense began its case on a rain-soaked Monday, the courtroom windows streaked with water that cast wavering shadows across the proceedings. Sophia Mendez approached her task with surgical precision, first calling forensic expert Dr. Elijah Ramirez to challenge the timeline established by the prosecution. Based on body temperature and lividity patterns, Dr. Ramirez testified, Mrs. Croft died between 2:30 and 3:15 p.m. Traffic camera footage confirms Mr. Croft's car remained parked at his office building until 4:23 p.m., when he received the call from Detective Abernathy. "Could Mr. Croft have left his office without his car?" Sophia asked. "It's possible, but unlikely given the distance. It's approximately 5.2 miles between his office and home. Round trip on foot or public transportation would have taken significantly longer than the window allows, especially considering the time needed to commit the crime and clean up." District Attorney Winters countered during cross-examination. "But it's not impossible, is it, Doctor?" "Not impossible, no, just highly improbable." As the defense continued building its case, Rebecca Chen pursued her own investigation, tracking down Professor Emmett Grayson, the Professor E from the video. She found him living in a retirement community in Vermont, his health failing, but his mind still sharp. "Did you give an interview to Elara Croft about Julian and Thomas Blackwood?" she asked, sitting beside his wheelchair on the facility's sun porch. The old man's eyes widened with recognition. "Yes, though I didn't know she was recording. She said she was researching campus culture for a documentary." He paused, coughing weakly. "After she left, I received a threatening phone call. Someone knew I had spoken to her." "Do you stand by what you said about Julian?" Professor Grayson's gaze drifted to the window. "I saw what I saw, but after all these years, perhaps memory plays tricks. The official ruling was suicide, and Blackwood had a history of depression." "Did you ever speak to Julian about it directly?" "Once. He denied being there that night. Said I was mistaken. Maybe I was." The professor's arthritic hand trembled as he adjusted his blanket. "Ms. Chen, whatever happened back then, it destroyed more lives than just Thomas's. Julian was never the same afterward. Neither was I." Back at the courthouse, Sophia called her star witness, Dr. Samantha Liu, a digital forensics expert who had analyzed Julian's devices. The search phrase, "How thoroughly do police check alibis?" was entered at 3:42 p.m. when traffic cameras confirmed Mr. Croft's car was still at his office, Dr. Liu testified. More significantly, analysis of the keystroke patterns suggests this search wasn't conducted by Mr. Croft at all. A murmur swept through the courtroom. "Please explain," Sophia prompted. "Every individual has unique typing patterns, rhythm, speed, common errors. The search in question deviates significantly from Mr. Croft's established patterns. Furthermore, the search was conducted via a remote access program that had been installed on Mr. Croft's laptop 3 weeks before the murder." "Are you saying someone hacked Mr. Croft's computer?" "Yes, someone with physical access to the device at some point, who installed a backdoor program allowing them to operate the computer remotely." The revelation shifted the atmosphere in the courtroom. Julian, who had maintained his composure throughout the trial, visibly relaxed for the first time, a glimmer of hope crossing his features. During cross-examination, D.A. Winters attempted to undermine Dr. Liu's testimony. "Isn't it possible Mr. Croft installed this program himself precisely to create this defense?" "Possible, but unlikely. The program was professionally concealed. Mr. Croft's technical skills, based on his computer usage history, wouldn't have been sufficient to execute this level of deception." As the day's proceedings ended, Rebecca approached Julian and Sophia as they exited the courthouse. "Mr. Croft, I need to speak with you about Thomas Blackwood." Julian froze, his momentary optimism evaporating. Sophia stepped between them. "My client has no comment for the press." "I'm not here as press right now," Rebecca insisted. "I have information about Elara's documentary that could help your case." After a tense moment, Sophia relented, arranging a meeting in a private room at her law offices. There, Rebecca played the video of Professor Grayson's interview. Julian watched with growing horror. When it ended, he remained silent for several long moments. "Is it true?" Rebecca finally asked. "Were you involved in Blackwood's death?" "No," Julian replied, his voice barely audible. "But I might as well have been." He looked up, his eyes haunted. "Thomas was my roommate, my best friend. He was brilliant, troubled. He had evidence that the university president's son was running a cheating ring, selling exam answers. Thomas wanted to expose it, but I convinced him to wait, to think about the consequences. Julian's hands clenched into fists. The next day, he was found dead. Suicide, they said. I always wondered if they got to him, if they threatened him. I blamed myself for not supporting him. That's what Professor Grayson overheard, me saying I should have stopped Thomas before he confronted them, before they could destroy him. Did Ilara know this story? Sophia asked quietly. Yes. I told her everything early in our marriage. She understood my guilt, my regret. She wasn't planning to expose me in her documentary. She was investigating the university's cover-up of the cheating scandal. She had found other victims, other stories similar to Thomas's. Rebecca leaned forward. Who would have wanted to stop her investigation? The Caldwell family, Julian replied without hesitation. Richard Caldwell was university president then. His son, Spencer, now runs one of the largest private equity firms in the country. They've carefully cultivated their reputation for generations. A scandal like this coming to light would destroy that. As they spoke, across town, Detective Abernathy received a call from the forensics lab. New DNA evidence had been found under Ilara's fingernails, DNA that didn't match Julian's profile. The case, which had seemed so straightforward, was suddenly anything but. Ulbreu Chapter 4. The final days of the trial unfolded against a backdrop of mounting tension. Outside the courthouse, the crowds had grown, their chants echoing through the streets of Boston. Inside, Julian sat straighter, energized by the possibility of vindication. Sophia had successfully petitioned to introduce the new DNA evidence, along with Rebecca's findings about the Caldwell connection to Ilara's documentary. Detective Abernathy took the stand. His earlier confidence notably diminished under Sophia's questioning. Detective, when did you become aware of the DNA evidence that doesn't match my client? 3 days ago. The lab initially missed it during their standard testing. And this DNA belongs to whom? Abernathy shifted uncomfortably. It's not in any criminal database. We're still working to identify it. Did you investigate other potential suspects in Mrs. Croft's murder, or did you focus exclusively on my client from the beginning? We followed standard procedure. Yes or no, Detective? Did you investigate the possibility that Mrs. Croft's murder might be connected to her documentary work? We examined her professional life, yes. Did that examination include looking into the subjects of her current project, specifically the Caldwell family and their potential involvement in a decades-old university scandal? D.A. Winters stood immediately. Objection. Counsel is introducing speculation without foundation. Your Honor, Sophia countered. I have evidence directly connecting Mrs. Croft's documentary work to a potentially explosive investigation of the Caldwell family. An investigation that provided strong motive for someone other than my client to silence her. Judge Harrison considered briefly. I'll allow limited questioning on this line, but tread carefully, Counselor. For the next hour, Sophia methodically dismantled the prosecution's tunnel vision, revealing how Ilara had received threatening emails in the weeks before her death. Emails the police had discovered, but failed to thoroughly investigate once they focused on Julian. Rebecca Chen, sitting in the gallery, watched with mixed emotions. Her investigative instincts had been right. The convenient narrative wasn't the true one. But as a journalist, she knew the story was far from over. The connections between Ilara's murder, the Caldwell family, and Thomas Blackwood's death 20 years earlier were too significant to ignore. In a dramatic turn, Sophia called one final witness, Spencer Caldwell himself, subpoenaed based on Rebecca's evidence connecting him to Ilara's investigation. Impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his family's wealth and influence evident in every confident gesture, Caldwell approached the stand with the easy assurance of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. Mr. Caldwell, were you aware that Ilara Croft was investigating allegations of academic fraud at Dartmouth during your time as a student there? I heard rumors about her project, yes, he answered smoothly, though I fail to see how ancient campus gossip relates to her tragic death. Did you or anyone representing your interests contact Mrs. Croft about her documentary? My assistant may have reached out to request an interview, standard procedure when someone is doing a piece that might mention our firm. Sophia approached the witness stand. Mr. Caldwell, phone records show 7 calls between your private line and Mrs. Croft in the 2 weeks before her death. The final call lasted 23 minutes and occurred the morning she was killed. Would you characterize that as standard procedure? Caldwell's composure faltered momentarily. I was concerned about potential misrepresentations of my college years. I simply wanted to present my side. And what side would that be, Mr. Caldwell? The side where you ran a cheating ring that led to Thomas Blackwood's suicide when he threatened to expose you. Objection! D.A. Winters shouted. Counsel is badgering the witness and making unfounded accusations. Sustained, Judge Harrison ruled. Ms. Mendez, confine your questions to relevant matters. Sophia nodded, but the damage was done. Jurors watched Caldwell with new suspicion as she continued her questioning, gradually establishing that he had means, motive, and opportunity. His GPS data placed him in Boston the day of the murder, contradicting his earlier claim that he'd been in New York. In her closing argument, Sophia addressed the jury with quiet confidence. The prosecution asks you to believe a story, that Julian Croft, a man with no history of violence, suddenly murdered his wife to prevent her from revealing his secrets. But the evidence tells a different story. It tells of a grieving husband railroaded by a rushed investigation. It tells of powerful interests with far more to lose from Ilara Croft's work. Most importantly, it reveals reasonable doubt, not just a sliver but a chasm of doubt that makes conviction impossible if you honor your oath to follow the evidence. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they finally returned, the courtroom fell silent. Julian stood, his heart pounding as the foreman read the verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Julian collapsed into his chair, overcome with emotion. Outside, the crowds responded with mixed reactions, some cheering, others protesting. The media frenzy intensified, with Julian's acquittal dominating headlines nationwide. 1 month later, Julian sat across from Rebecca Chen at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Boston. The trial's aftermath had been brutal. His reputation remained tarnished, despite his acquittal, his writing career in limbo. But he was free, and determined to honor Ilara's memory by completing what she had started. The police have reopened the investigation, Rebecca told him, sliding a folder across the table. Spencer Caldwell's DNA is being compared to the sample found under Ilara's nails. They're also looking into Thomas Blackwood's death again. Julian nodded, his eyes tired but resolute. She always said truth was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Your story isn't over yet, Rebecca said, opening her notebook. People need to hear the real version, not just of the trial, but of everything that led to it. Ilara's work, Thomas's death, the cover-up. Are you ready to tell it? Julian looked out the window at the Boston skyline, the city where his life had unraveled, and where, perhaps, it might begin again. Yes, he said finally, for Ilara, for Thomas, for the truth. As they talked into the evening, neither noticed the man watching them from a car across the street, Detective Abernathy, now suspended pending an internal investigation into his handling of the case. His career was likely over, but his determination to find justice for Ilara Croft remained undiminished. The truth, he knew, was rarely as simple as guilty or innocent. And sometimes the most important verdict came long after the courtroom doors had closed. In homes across America, the story of Julian Croft continued to spark debate. Innocent or guilty? The trial had ended, but the question lingered, a reminder that justice, like truth itself, was seldom black and white, but rather a shifting landscape of perspectives, each valid from where one stood, each incomplete without the others.